In 705 AD, Lady Wang screamed as palace guards wrapped her trembling body in layers of wet silk. But that's not even the worst part, because what happened next was so psychologically brutal that historians spent centuries trying to bury this story. You see, this wasn't just torture. This was a calculated method designed exclusively for China's most privileged women. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why noble ladies would literally beg for a sword through the heart instead of facing the silk cocoon. I'm about to reveal 3 things that will completely change how you see ancient China. First, why this horrifying method was reserved only for aristocratic women. Second, the twisted psychological reason it was considered worse than death itself. And third, how one ruthless empress weaponized this torture to eliminate her political enemies. Subscribe now, because what you're about to learn has been hidden from mainstream history for over 1013. It's the Tang Dynasty. 618 to 97 AD, China's golden age. The Silk Road is pumping wealth into the empire. Poetry is flourishing, and for the first time in Chinese history, women can actually hold real power. But here's what your history textbook never told you. The same silk that made these women beautiful and powerful could become their ultimate nightmare. You have to understand, in Tang Dynasty China, social status wasn't just about money. It was about honor, dignity, and maintaining faith. For aristocratic women, their reputation was literally more valuable than their lives. Confucian society taught that a woman's virtue was her family's most precious asset. Now imagine you are a high-ranking court lady. You wear the finest silk, you influence political decisions, you command respect from thousands. Your entire identity is built on elegance and refinement. But behind those silk curtains of nobility lurked a torture so specific, so calculated, that it could destroy everything you were in the most humiliating way possible. And the sick genius behind it. It used the very symbol of your status, silk itself, as the instrument of your destruction. What I'm about to show you will make your skin crawl. Here's how it worked. And I warn you, this gets disturbing fast. First, executioners would strip the victim completely naked. Already, for an aristocratic woman who'd never been seen undressed by anyone except her husband, this was psychological torture. But they were just getting started. Then came the silk. Not dry silk, wet. They would wrap the victim from toe to neck in layer after layer of soaking wet silk fabric, the finest quality. Of course, the same material that once adorned her body in luxury was now becoming her death shroud. But here's where the true horror begins. As silk dries, it contracts slowly, methodically. Over the course of hours, those beautiful threads would gradually tighten around the victim's body, like a python made of fabric. According to Tang Dynasty court records, discovered in Buddhist monasteries, victims would remain conscious for most of the process. They could feel every fiber slowly constricting, cutting off circulation bit by bit. Their fingers would turn blue first, then their arms as the silk cocoon squeezed tighter and tighter. The psychological torture was just as brutal as the physical pain. Imagine lying there completely helpless, watching the very symbol of your wealth and status slowly crush the life out of you. The irony was intentional and absolutely devastating. One monastery record describes a victim pleading, "Please just use the sword. Please don't let the silk take me." But this wasn't even the worst part, because there were actually 3 variations of this torture, each more horrifying than the last. And the reasons why only aristocratic women faced this fate will shock you to your core. Don't click away yet, because what's coming next reveals the twisted psychology behind this nightmare. Here's what historians don't want you to know. This torture wasn't really about killing people. It was about something far more sinister. The complete destruction of social identity. You see, in ancient China, aristocratic women existed in a very specific social space. They weren't just wealthy. They were symbols of refined civilization itself. Confucian philosophy taught that these women embodied the highest virtues of society. So when the state wanted to send a message that went beyond simple execution, they needed something that would destroy not just the person, but everything she represented. And that's where the genius of silk torture becomes truly disturbing. Think about it from a psychological perspective. Every day of her life, an aristocratic woman touched silk. She wore it, slept on it, decorated her home with it. Silk meant safety, luxury, beauty, power. But here's the twisted part. By using silk as the murder weapon, the executioners weren't just killing the victim. They were corrupting every positive association she'd ever had with the symbol of her status. Traditional executions, beheading, hanging, even dismemberment. These were over quickly. The victim died, but their social identity remained intact. Their families could still honor their memory. But silk torture, this was designed to strip away dignity layer by layer, literally and figuratively. The victim died slowly, naked, helpless, wrapped in the very material that once made her powerful. It was social murder and physical murder combined into one horrifying package. And here's the part that'll make your blood run cold. According to recovered court documents, witnesses were often required to watch. Other aristocratic women were forced to see what happened when you crossed the imperial throne. The message was crystal clear: your wealth, your status, your silk robes, none of it can protect you. We can turn your greatest symbol of power into your destroyer. However, one empress turned this torture into her secret weapon for something even more chilling than punishment: political assassination disguised as justice. Empress Wu Zetian, China's only female emperor, didn't just inherit this torture method. She perfected it into a surgical instrument of political control. And what she did with it will haunt you. Wu Zetian ruled from 6, and she faced a problem no male emperor ever had. How do you eliminate female rivals without looking like you're threatened by other women? Traditional execution would make her look weak, like she feared competition. But silk torture, that was genius. She could frame it as punishment for moral corruption, the perfect crime for destroying other powerful women while maintaining her own image. The old book of Tang historical chronicles reveal her strategy would fabricate charges of adultery or treason against noble ladies who threatened her power. Then instead of a quick execution, she'd order the silk cocoon treatment. Here's the psychological warfare behind it. Every aristocratic woman in the kingdom would know that their beautiful silk robes could become their death sentence at Wu's whim. She didn't need to execute many. The fear alone kept potential rivals in line. But the most documented case shows just how ruthless Wu could be. In 695 AD, she ordered silk torture for Lady Kang, the wife of her own stepson, Crown Prince Li Zetian. Why? Because Lady Jiang had started gaining influence with court officials. She wasn't plotting rebellion. She was just becoming too popular, too threatening to Wu's absolute control. The historical record describes Lady Kang's final words: "Your Majesty, I served the imperial family faithfully. Why must I die wrapped in shame?" Wu's response, according to court witnesses, was chilling. "The silk shows your true nature, beautiful on the surface but deadly when bound too tightly to power." Lady Jiang took 14 hours to die. Wu required all court ladies to attend the first 4 hours as a lesson in virtue. But here's what makes this even more disturbing. Wu didn't stop with political rivals. The chronicles suggest she used silk torture as psychological conditioning for her entire court. The threat alone became more powerful than armies. But the most disturbing case involved her own daughter-in-law. And what happened there reveals the true psychological masterpiece behind this torture. Because what I'm about to tell you explains why victims would literally beg for any other form of execution. I know this is getting dark, but if you're still watching, you're clearly as fascinated by history's brutal truths as I am. Make sure you're subscribed, because next week, I'm revealing the hidden torture methods of medieval European queens that make this look tame. Now here's the part that reveals the true evil genius behind silk torture and why it was psychologically more devastating than any other execution method in human history. You see, traditional torture was about breaking the body to extract information or confessions. But silk torture, this was about breaking the mind while leaving the victim completely aware of what was happening. Remember, silk doesn't just constrict, it constricts slowly. Show time-lapse of fabric tightening. Court records describe the process taking anywhere from 6 to... During that entire time, the victim remained conscious and aware. But here's the psychological masterpiece. The victim could feel every single thread tightening. They could track their own death fiber by fiber, breath. Imagine the mental torture of knowing exactly how you're going to die and being powerless to stop it. One surviving account from a Buddhist monastery describes a victim saying, "I can feel the 73rd thread cutting into my wrist. I know when the 100th thread tightens, I will lose feeling in my hands." The silk would tighten in waves, sometimes fast, sometimes slow as humidity and temperature changed. This meant the victim never knew if the next moment would bring relief or increased agony. Hope and despair alternated like psychological torture. But the most disturbing element, the silk, was always white, pure white, the color of innocence and virtue in Chinese culture. So even as it killed them, victims were surrounded by the visual symbol of everything they were supposed to represent. And here's the part that'll give you nightmares. Multiple historical sources record victims begging for traditional execution instead. Ladies who would rather face a sword and axe, even burning, than endure the slow psychological breakdown of silk torture. One court record states, Lady Chen wept and pleaded for the executioner's blade, saying, "Let me die as a warrior, not as prey caught in a spider's web." The method was so psychologically devastating that when the Tang Dynasty fell in 97 AD, silk torture disappeared almost completely from Chinese history. New dynasties actively banned it, not because it was inhumane. Medieval China had plenty of brutal execution methods, but because it was too effective at creating psychological trauma in witnesses. Buddhism's growing influence also played a role. Buddhist philosophy emphasized that suffering should have purpose, either justice or enlightenment. But silk torture served neither goal. It existed purely to maximize psychological destruction. By 960 AD, the method had vanished so completely that later historians questioned whether it ever really existed. Only the discovery of monastery records in the 1970s confirmed that this nightmare was horrifyingly real. So there you have it. The silk torture wasn't just an execution method. It was the ultimate symbol of how patriarchal power could weaponize even beauty and luxury against women who dared to threaten the established order. Every time you touch silk today, remember this. Throughout history, the same materials that represent elegance and refinement have been twisted into instruments of control and destruction. But here's what makes this story even more relevant today. The psychological principles behind silk torture are still used in modern forms of oppression. The tactic of turning someone's source of strength into their weakness, using their own identity against them. These methods didn't disappear with ancient China. Understanding historical oppression like this helps us recognize when similar psychological warfare appears in our modern world. Whether it's social media shaming, economic manipulation, or political intimidation, the core strategy remains the same. Turn someone's pride into their prison. So here's my question for you. What other refined historical punishments do you think we've forgotten? What brutal truths are hiding behind the elegant facades of civilized societies throughout history? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this video opened your eyes to history's hidden darkness, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell. Because next week, I'm diving into the torture methods used by medieval European queens. And trust me, what they did to their female rivals makes silk torture look merciful by comparison. Until then, remember history's most beautiful surfaces often hide its darkest secrets.